Hello again, everybody. Did you all recover from your jet lag from Japan? We'll be going in the other direction this time, to the islands and fishing culture of Denmark. Sort of wet, pretty cold, and full of its own interesting sights and scenery. Denmark is a beautiful country. Let's dive in. Americans get lost when it comes to all of those smaller European countries, so I wanted to make sure our captain knew where he was flying. Denmark is just north of Germany, between Sweden and Norway. From Fresno, it is about 5,460 miles. It's also much further north, higher than Maine even, and about the same height as the non-populated parts of Canada. There are very cold winters, and even in the summer it doesn't get too hot, with an average around the mid-60s. There's also a fairly heavy humidity, despite the fact that at no point in Denmark can you ever be more than 30 miles from the sea. The term Scandinavia, in local usage, covers the three kingdoms of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, but in English usage, it also sometimes refers to the Scandinavian peninsula, or to the broader region, which includes Finland and Iceland. This broader region is usually known as the Nordic countries. Our first view of Denmark as the plane comes down below the clouds is of the capital city, Copenhagen. Nearly 1,000 years old, Copenhagen began as a simple fishing village and a commerce center. Today, Copenhagen is the most visited city in Scandinavia, with scenes and sights from harbor tours to innovative merchant centers. The Danish capital draws more than 1 million visitors each year. According to the World Happiness Report in 2013, Copenhagen is the happiest city in the world. It also regularly tops the charts of the best place to live. It can be quieter than a typical big city. About 55% of Copenhageners cycle to and from work, so the cityscape is dominated by bike lanes, bike parking, and special traffic lights. The Danish capital aims to be the world's best city for cyclists. Last time, we began our tour of Japan with an amusement park, so how about we stick with tradition? Besides, I think our residents will get a kick to know that this is the second oldest amusement park in the world, is named Tivoli Gardens. Tivoli was the brainchild of George Carstensen and opened in 1843. It is said that he convinced the reigned king to allow to build the park so that the kingdom of people could go to amuse themselves and think less about politics. It consists of an amusement park, a concert hall, aquarium, and performing arts theater. Such events that take place include the Tivoli Boys Guard Parade, and the Tivoli Symphony Orchestra still performs there. After a trip overseas, Walt Disney was inspired by what he saw at Tivoli Gardens, Copenhagen, and he created Disneyland based on similar concepts. In the park, there are nearly 45 different types of restaurants, cafes, and food stands throughout Tivoli Gardens, Copenhagen. There are currently 25 rides at the amusement park, including 3 roller coasters. Now, luckily, I called ahead and asked them to set up Christmas at Tivoli Gardens for us, because it's supposed to be one of the most amazing and beautiful sights. Nearly 2 million Christmas lights illuminate the park and create a wintry, magical scene. The softly falling snow, common to the season, doesn't hurt either, of course. Tivoli Gardens plays a host to one of Copenhagen's famous Christmas markets during the holiday season. Here you can see, behind the carousel, the little booths and shops set up. If you're not familiar with the concept of Christmas markets, let's leave the heat behind and spend a little time in Copenhagen at Christmas. Christmas markets are open-air markets traditionally held in the town square. The market has food, drink, and seasonal items from open-air stalls accompanied by traditional singing and dancing. Associated with the celebration of Christmas during the 4 weeks of Advent, these markets originated in Germany, but are now being held in many other countries. The history of Christmas markets goes back to the late Middle Ages in the German-speaking part of Europe, and in many parts of the former Holy Roman Empire that includes many eastern regions of France. Some of the traditional sweet snacks that are being served up everywhere during the holidays are glögg, which is mulled wine, and æbleskiver, which are pancake puffs. Children get a chance to meet Father Christmas and many of the goods for sale are homemade. In Denmark, at least one of the famous Christmas markets is indoors, in an old equestrian hall, and another has an ice skating rink. Another, the Old Town, is an open-air museum that has preserved the bygone days of Denmark. Their Christmas market is no different, offering a glimpse into Danish Christmas from the 17th century to the beginning of the 20th century with over 30 exhibitions. But back to the present time. Some of you may have noticed that I called Tivoli Gardens the second oldest amusement park in the world. The first is actually also located in Denmark and is called Bakken. The park opened in 1583 and is the world's oldest operating amusement park. Nowadays, the park receives 2.5 to 2.7 million visitors per year, making it the second most popular attraction in Denmark after the more widely known Tivoli Gardens. Apart from the roller coaster, you can also find lots of fun fair rides like bumper cars, a giant swing, an indoor ghost train, several carousels, a 30-meter tall drop tower, a swinging Viking ship, and a log ride. It must be something in the Danish spirit that attracts the whimsical and fun. Despite inventing amusement parks, Denmark is also the birthplace of the famous Hans Christian Andersen, the writer of fantastic and now traditional fairy tales for children. Unveiled on August 23, 1913, The Little Mermaid was a gift from Danish brewer Carl Jacobsen to the city of Copenhagen. The sculpture is made of bronze and granite and was inspired by Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale about a mermaid who gives up everything to be united with a young, handsome prince on land. Carl Jacobsen fell in love with the character after watching a ballet performance based on the fairy tale at the Royal Danish Theatre in Copenhagen. The brewer was also so captivated by the fairy tale and the ballet that he commissioned the sculptor Edjard Eriksson to create a sculpture of the mermaid. Sitting on a rock at the entrance of the Copenhagen harbor since 1913, she also has been a very popular target for vandals, who have blown her off her perch, beheaded her, and painted her. Serving as a symbol of Denmark, the statue has become the focus for those wanting to send a message against an action of the Denmark government or people. Speaking of government, let's stop in on Roskilde Cathedral and see the history of that government. Here, 39 former kings and queens of Denmark have all been buried. The magnificent red brick cathedral with its impressive tall spires is considered one of Denmark's most important architectural monuments. For more than 1,000 years, there have been church buildings on these grounds. The present cathedral was probably built in the 1170s by Bishop Absalon. Since then, the cathedral has been rebuilt several times and new chapels embracing various architectural styles have gradually been added. In the early 1400s, the cathedral was a designated royal burial place, and since the Reformation, all Danish kings have found their final resting place here. The Danish monarchy can be traced back to Gorm the Old. The monarchy was originally elective, but in practice the choice was normally limited to the eldest son of the reigning monarch. The Democratic Constitution of June 5, 1849 changed the monarchy's status from absolute to constitutional. The Act of Succession of March 27, 1953 allowed for the possibility of female monarch. That is what enabled Her Majesty Queen Margaret to accede to the throne in 1972. In 2013, the House of Glucksburg celebrated 150 years on the Danish throne. But we can interact with Danish history through much more than just the monarchy. Stretch those arms and get ready, because we're going to go out sailing in a reconstructed Viking longboat. The Maritime Research Center of Denmark offers these trips as excursions around some of the fjords of Denmark, and though they call them cruises, they're not very similar to the pampering and fine life on the big cruise ships. The passengers play an active part in the sailing. There will be a short instruction before setting out and stories of the ships and the fjords en route. The Vikings came from 3 countries in Scandinavia: Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, and the Danes are still proud of their Viking ancestry. Each summer, Viking festivals break out, putting on shows or plays from the Viking era or about the Viking era, and offering Viking food, music, crafts, and more. They're sort of similar to our Renaissance festivals, just only focused on one country of the period. There are even events for the children, and some festivals stay open year-round so that birthday parties or other celebrations can happen on the grounds, where yes, you can even rent a Viking to add even more ambiance to your festivities. The highlight of the festivals are usually the plays, which are considered an important cultural artifact and enjoyed very much. But the most famous play associated with Denmark was written by an Englishman in 1599, and it is set here at Kronborg Castle. The author was a man you may have heard of, William Shakespeare, and you might know the play as well, Hamlet. In Hamlet, Shakespeare called Kronborg Castle Elsinore. This has become the English name for Helsingør, the town where you can visit Kronborg. Kronborg Castle has existed at Helsingør since 1420. Today, Hamlet's spirit is still roaming the halls of Kronborg, and every summer you can experience the drama performance of Hamlet on an open-air stage in the courtyard. A tour of the castle will take you through beautifully decorated rooms with Renaissance interiors that reveal the residents' decadent lifestyle, though it might even appear simple to our taste. It is unlikely that Shakespeare ever walked through these halls, and far more likely that his work was inspired by ancient Scandinavian legends, and his knowledge of the castle, for there is some very interesting real connections in his descriptions, were obtained from other actors who we did know performed here in Denmark, right within the castle, and who we know performed in Shakespeare's plays. So why set the play in a place he had never been, and had to get secondhand information from? Many believe that the canny bard was playing a careful card to flatter the future King James I, whose wife Anne was sister to the Danish king, and who had lived at the castle. James also stayed there, soon after they were married some years before Hamlet was written. A playwright has to stay on the good side of the king, don't you know? And at any rate, even having never been there, the Danes are pleased with their role in Shakespeare's work, and performances of Hamlet take place routinely in the palace, in the courtyard, or at nearby theaters. This one is in the Frederick II Ballroom at Kronborg Castle. Another more local hero is also ensconced in Kronborg Castle, Ogier the Dane. He was a fearsome Viking warrior. His entire life from birth to death is shrouded in mystery. According to ancient legends, Holger Danske never died. Inside, he sleeps in the dark cellar of Kronborg Castle. The first mention of the sleeping hero, Holger Danske, comes from Songs of Roland, an epic poem based on a battle in 778, during the reign of Charlemagne. It is the oldest surviving major work of French literature and exists in various manuscript versions, which testify to its enormous and enduring popularity in the 12th to 14th centuries. There is a prophecy related to the birth of Holger Danske. He was apparently destined to become one of the most valiant warriors, never to be vanquished. According to French and Scandinavian myths, Holger Danske was the son of Joffrey, who was the first Christian king of Denmark during the 8th century. He was trained to become a great warrior from early age. He was very tall, about 7 feet. Legends tell he possessed an enchanted sword that was given to him by the fairy Morgana. His magical sword was a great weapon that helped him become invincible. When Muslims invaded Danish territory, Holger joined forces with Charles Martel, the Duke and Prince of the Franks. Together with Charles Martel, he fought against the Muslims at Poitiers in 732 AD. At one point in his life, he was captured and became a hostage of Charlemagne. Holger eventually became Charlemagne's vassal and developed a fearsome reputation, yet Holger could also be merciful. On one occasion, for example, he even forgave Charlemagne's son for killing his own son Baldwin with a chessboard. The legend of Holger Danske became popular, much thanks to Hans Christian Andersen, who said that Holger never died. Instead, he is a sleeping hero residing in the dark cellar where no one ever goes of Kronborg Castle at Elsinore. Dressed in full armor made of iron and steel, Holger still sits before a table, resting his head on his arm. His beard has grown long into the table as he slumbers and dreams of Denmark. Every Christmas Eve, an angel of God comes and assures him that what he has dreamed is true, and that he can safely go back to sleep, because Denmark is in no real danger. But if danger ever does come, then Holger Danske will arise, breaking the table in pieces as he pulls out his beard, and then he will come forward and strike out and be heard in all of the lands of the earth. Statues have also been raised for other legendary figures of Danish history, such as their lore around giants and trolls who inhabit their land. The sculptures, which sit tucked away underneath bridges, behind trees, up on hillsides, and hidden within the brush of the forest, can only be located using a treasure map provided on Danish artist Thomas Dambo's website, or deciphering poems engraved in stones near the sculptures. As humans, we often have a way of choosing the beaten path and the main roads, Dambo said in a video regarding his project. So when the municipalities of West Copenhagen contacted me about a project, it seemed natural to make something which could get people out and explore the beautiful nature in the hidden outskirts, which you usually wouldn't see. Each of the sculptures is made using scrap wood that would have otherwise been thrown out, whether it be trees that were cut down or windmills that were no longer in use. The pieces include Teddy Friendly, a giant sculpture standing right beside a lakeshore with a hand held out to help people cross the water stream. There's also Sleeping Louis, a sculpture napping in a location where homeless people would often sleep due to leftover trash in the area. The work also creates a shelter that people can sleep inside of. This next stop might look like a cemetery, but it's quite the opposite, and another example of Danish innovation and culture. Since 1987, a number of musicians have left their mark in the Park of Music by planting a tree to commemorate their visit to Aalborg. Sir Cliff Richard was the first artist to plant a tree in Kildenparken in 1987, when he performed in Aalborg Congress and Culture Center. Since then, many more trees and artists have joined, and today, more than 80 great artists have left their mark on the park with oaks and wild cherry trees. Some of the trees are accompanied by the artist's own music and can be activated by the park's visitors by pressing a button at the foot of the tree. Some of the artists heard at the park are Sir Cliff Richard, Sting, Kenny Rogers, Rod Stewart, Sir Elton John, Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra, Elaine Page, Victor Borge, Bryan Adams, and ZZ Top. These are the Jelling stones in Denmark. The Jelling stones are massive carved rune stones from the 10th century, found at the town of Jelling in Denmark. The older of the two Jelling stones was raised by King Gorm the Old in memory of his wife Thyra. The larger of the two stones was raised by King Gorm's son, Harald Bluetooth, in memory of his parents, celebrating his conquest of Denmark and Norway and his conversion of the Danes to Christianity. The runic inscriptions on these stones are considered the best known in Denmark. The stones are strongly identified with the creation of Denmark as a nation-state. Both inscriptions mention the name Denmark. Here we can get a better view of the larger stone, the one discussing the conversion of the Danes to Christianity. On one side of the stone is also the oldest known depiction of Christ in Denmark. You can see it there on the right. Because this stone explicitly mentions the conversion of Denmark from Norse paganism and the process of Christianization, alongside a depiction of the crucified Christ. It is popularly dubbed Denmark's baptismal certificate. In 1955, a plaster cast of this stone was made for a festival in London. It is now located in the grounds of the Danish Church in London. The copy is painted in bright colors, like the original would have been. Most of the original paint has flaked away from the original stone, but enough small specks of paint remain to tell us what the colors looked like when they were freshly painted. I thought this was very interesting, seeing the stone as it would have been back in its medieval glory. If you really like color, Denmark has another great site for you. The Aarhus Art Museum in Denmark is a Technicolor halo. Its artist, Olafur Eliasson's permanent work, Your Rainbow Panorama, allows guests to walk around and see the surrounding city through every color of the rainbow, from the orange-yellow ports to the purple houses next door. The city, as viewed through the shaded glass walls of the circular walkway, is transformed into a new form of monochrome every few feet. The light coming in through the glass paints visitors in an equally strong light, making each person strolling through the 150-foot ring into a living crayon. Equally striking from the outside, Your Rainbow Panorama makes Aarhus one of the easiest buildings in the city to find. From the ground, people can watch as tiny figures of people walk around and around, taking in colorful new views at every turn. Eliasson, the Danish-Icelandic artist of Your Rainbow Panorama, was reputably inspired by Dante's Divine Comedy, and finally reaching the perfection of paradise. He created Your Rainbow Panorama to add to something that was already there, the view of Aarhus, and to make people think about where art ends and the museum begins. The Danes seem to love the mixture of old legend and new technology, of their mystic past and their artistic expression of the future and present. Take, for example, this statue, underwater, telling the results of an old Danish story. The tale of Agnet and the merman is originally passed down by oral tradition. As the story goes, a young woman named Agnet was passing by the sea when a remarkably forward and decisive merman emerged from the waters and offered her his hand in marriage. Being an impulsive girl herself, she dropped what she was doing and went to live with him beneath the waves. The couple had 7 little mer kids, and things seemed to be going great until Agnet heard distant church bells ringing from land. She left her mer family to pay a visit to her old life, promising to return. However, once she was reacquainted with her old life, Agnet decided not to return to the sea, leaving her merman to be a single dad, forever pining for his lost love. The underwater sculpture, sitting beneath the Horsbro Bridge at the bottom of Frederiksholm Canal, depicts Agnet's husband and her abandoned children reaching up towards the surface, longing for their mother in a haunting scene captured in eternal bronze. For an example of Danish expressionism, we'll stop at Grundtvig's church. This monumental Gothic-style church is one of the most distinctive in the city. Indeed, it looks unlike any other church in the world. More than 6 million yellow bricks form a serene, minimalistic look with a soaring facade that evokes the shape of a church organ. Grundtvig's church was built to honor N.F.S. Grundtvig, a 19th century Danish philosopher, historian, poet, and reformer. His influential ideas earned him a monument in his name shortly after World War I. The design is meant to be a synthesis of numerous building styles, merging the scale of Gothic vertical architecture with geometric expressionism and traditional Danish styles. Inspired by Grundtvig's work, Jensen Klint based the design primarily on the stepped gabled churches found in the local villages, but on a far grander scale. The massive church is 259 feet long. The interior can hold about as many people as Copenhagen Cathedral. To balance the Gothic proportions of the interior, more than 6 million yellow bricks, a traditional Danish material, were uniformly used in keeping with classic Danish minimalism. The yellow color was chosen to represent ascension, literally and spiritually, and indeed the church seems to be ever reaching toward the sun, but the inside is very minimal. This next stop, our last in Denmark, is really what we in America would call a hippie commune. Freetown Christiania, or simply put, Christiania, is a neighborhood of only 850 residents in the Danish capital of Copenhagen that is largely known both inside and outside of the country as a big headache. Authorities regard Christiana as a large commune, as it is regulated by a special 1989 law that transferred supervisory powers from the municipality to the state. Created as a squatted military zone in 1971, Christiana has always had a special relationship with the law. Almost immediately after it was founded, Christiana became known as a hub for cannabis trade, an act that was tolerated by authorities until 2004. This isn't surprising, as after the military moved out of the area, homeless people took to the empty buildings, which were guarded by only a small collection of watchmen. It wasn't organized, but some claim that the takeover of the town by homeless men, women, and children was an act of protest against the Danish government in response to a lack of affordable housing in the city. Christiana has been sort of a hippie town ever since. Christianities, as they are known, have always been fond of meditation and yoga, only two examples of the many recreational outlets available here. The town also hosted an internationally renowned theater troupe. Many Danes outside of the commune see the town as a successful social experiment, a place where entrepreneurs are as highly regarded and valued as the drug addicts who take refuge in the area because of the ongoing negotiations concerning the legality of substance abuse. The rules in Christiana, which has developed within the commune and outside of any interaction with the traditional Danish government, forbid violence, guns, knives, hard drugs, stealing, bulletproof vests, and bikers' colors. While drugs such as cocaine and heroin are banned in the town, vendors sell marijuana from open stands that line Pusher Street, Christian's main strip. It certainly celebrates free spirits. I have to admit, I'd much more go for the Danish concept of hygge. Other cultures also have words to characterize a certain atmosphere. In English, the words used would probably be cozy. However, according to Danish anthropologists, translating hygge into hominess would be more correct, as the home in the Scandinavian sense is the place where you can be yourself and shut out the big, dark, and dangerous world outside. Hominess also implies some kind of community feeling, a togetherness, which is also part of the hygge concept. The origin of the word hygge is Norwegian and Old Nordic. It means seeking refuge, protection, and shelter from the raging of the outside elements. It makes sense this concept would permeate Danish culture, which has such cold winters and such long periods of darkness. Hygge is often described as the feeling of warm candles, homemade treats, warmth after cold, cool summer days in the forest, and being with friends after a day of adventuring, hiking, skiing, swimming, or playing in snow. And hygge isn't just limited to the winter, where making things cozy is so easy. It can also transfer out to the summer months, where times with friends and nature is highly prized. On Friday afternoons, Danish people like to pack up their cars, drive out to the countryside, and spend the weekend in conditions that are sometimes quite primitive. Every summer house is different, but most of them seem to have questionable plumbing, odd sleeping arrangements, and chipped dishes and glassware. The Danish summer house is an old tradition. 400 years ago, the government started offering small plots of land to the industrial workers who lived in crowded, sooty slums. The idea was that they could get away into the clean, fresh air on weekends and grow healthy vegetables. Fast forward to now, and very few people grow vegetables on their plots. Instead, these small summer house plots have become little kingdoms, with neatly clipped hedges all around and lots of lawn chairs and flower beds and bird feeders. In the center is a tiny, tiny house, usually not more than 400 square feet, where the entire family spends the summer. This little dollhouse is almost always lovingly taken care of. Freshly painted wooden facades, sparkling windows, flowery curtains. Some, like this one, have gotten more extravagant, but as fancy as they are small. There's usually room for one double bed or a fold-out couch, and then maybe there's a loft where a couple more people can sleep. Maybe a porch for one or two more. They're not meant for long-term living, just a weekend away. And on that warm and cozy note, we'll say goodbye to Denmark, such a creative, historical, and imaginative place. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about the culture and practices of this interesting country, and I will see you all next time as we explore Morocco.